one stat actually before we jumped into this.
Okay.
You brought up a good point that just inspired a thought.
Right here.
What's up, Whisper Nation, and welcome into the Thursday night matchup show. We are going to go through this Thursday night matchup here right on YouTube and help you guys deal with all your start-sit questions for this particular matchup. Before we do, if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe. Let us know what your start-sit questions are for this week, and we'll try to get those answered for you. I am Big Travie. You can find me on Twitter at BigTravieTFW. Tonight, I am joined by ARC, Austin Sear, who you can find on Twitter at Austin_R_Sear. Austin, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really looking forward to this Thursday game. It's a good one. I feel like we haven't had a good one in a while.
Yeah, definitely should be competitive. And we'll just see what happens here. New England coming off a few great wins, and they're going to be going to LA to face these Rams, who are hot off of some division wins as well. Johnny is on the other mic, Johnny Game Time Hicks. You can find him on Twitter at Johnny_Game Time. Johnny, week 14, this is the first matchup of the fantasy football playoffs. How you feeling, brother?
Oh my goodness, it is here. It is here, man. Everything that we've been working for. If you're in, this is a little bit nerve-wracking because this game, although it does bode to be a very entertaining game, I'm a little concerned, boys, on some of these fantasy assets that you would be willing to play in here.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the New England side of the ball, and those are the assets, that are not very plentiful on that side of the ball, but I do think that they are intriguing, and we'll start with the running back core, Austin. When we look at Damian Harris, that seems to be the one guy we think we can put our thumbprint on as reliable in this lineup.
He is, but before Damien Harris, there was a man named Sony Michelle who was leading the Patriots in rush attempts. And this is notable because Sony Michelle started off the year as their lead dog. Game 1 against Miami, he had 10 rush attempts, 7 attempts, 9 rush attempts. In his last game, week 3, before going down to the injured reserve. In that last game, he had 15 points, 117 yards on the ground from 9 carries, and caught both of his passes for 23 yards. I bring up this context because after that game, week 3, Sony Michelle hit the IR, and Damien Harris came back from being injured and really started performing at an efficient rate. Since Damien Harris took over week 4, he has been the number 25 fantasy running back in a points per game basis. And over the last 6 weeks, he's the number 15 running back on the season, which is encouraging. But Sony Michelle is now back from IR, and he'd been a healthy scratch for a while. And last week was the first time we got to see Sony Michelle active. So to your original question, Travis, yes, Damien Harris has been the most reliable and involved halfback, but Sony Michelle's still been working his way back. And last week we got to see of what I believe is going to be the sample and the breakdown of those two backs moving forward. And what we saw was Sony Michelle collect more rushing attempts than you probably wanted. He had 10 rushing attempts on the day, but he only collected 35 yards, a 3.5 yards per carry average, and he caught his only target for 23 yards. The opportunity is pretty good. The efficiency isn't great. Going over to Damien Harris, though, you love the contrast between these two running backs, Sony Michelle and Damien Harris, where Damien Harris did still lead the team in rush attempts. He had 16. He had 80 total yards on the ground. That's a 5 yards per carry average. And he also caught the lone target his way for 15 yards. So Damien Harris is the lead dog in this Patriots backfield. He looks to be the more efficient runner. He looks to be the guy getting the early down work. And Sony Michelle looks to be more of a spell. The only other person worth consideration is James White. James White is not getting a ton of opportunity on the ground. A total of 10 rushing attempts over the last 4 weeks combined. But he is still involved heavily in the passing game, and he's involved in the red zone. So you need to keep a little bit of an eye on that. If you wanted to take a deep desperation play on James White, hope he catches a red zone target and takes it to the house, maybe. But yeah, Damien Harris is definitely your best bet, and I don't hate him this week going up against the Rams rush defense.
Yeah, the Rams rush defense seems to be the way you can attack them because their secondary has been so good. I did just want to bring up the fact, you brought up that Damien Harris, RB15, weeks 6 through 13. Do you think Sony Michelle back just kind of limits Damien Harris's ceiling, but he's still a play for you?
He definitely limits his ceiling, but this is the Patriots. They've always had ceiling lowers. Before it was Sony Michelle, it was Rex Burkhead. They brought in other running backs. I think it was J.J. Taylor coming off the practice squad as well. So you never have this limited opportunity with a New England running back, especially with Cam Newton loving to rush the ball and grab some of those rushing touchdowns. So the ceiling's always going to be lowered, but the floor is what you're looking at right now. And Damian Harris looks to have one above the ground, which is good. And his ceiling is a high-end RB2.
Johnny, Austin mentioned Cam Newton not throwing too much. He hasn't done that a lot to these wide receivers. He's just kind of been getting done on the ground. How are you feeling about those wide receivers? Any pass catchers piquing your interest against a really stingy Rams secondary?
The one guy that people might consider, they might look at, would be Jacoby Myers, who's had 6 or more targets in 6 out of the last games, but he hasn't broken over 60 receiving yards in a single. He's only done that one time in that span. So you don't feel confident in the upside play there. And then you look at this, the matchup, right? Rams are dead last in points allowed to the wide receiver position. So I don't think there's anything to see here. The Demir Bird he's just too inconsistent. And same with N'Keal Harry. They keep trying to get him involved, but it's just too inconsistent.
Well, that brings us to Cam Newton, gents, and I had to take a peek at this because, look, Cam Newton is a guy that over his last, 5 of his last 6 games, he's had 18 or more fantasy points. He's had double-digit carries in 3 of his last 5 games and 6 rushing touchdowns over his last 6. So, he had that stretch where he bottomed out on us, but he's actually been pretty decent as of late. This is a streamable quarterback, but is this a streamable matchup? This is the second toughest matchup in fantasy. The Rams are only allowing 13.8 points per game on average. They're only allowing a 62% completion percentage. For reference, Cam's is 66% on the year. You look at the Rams, they're sacking quarterbacks at the 3rd highest rate this season. The Rams are only allowing, on average, 219 passing yards per game. You look at Cam, he's only averaging 186 of those. There are a lot of streamers that have bad weeks, and so I do think that Cam's rushing ability leaves him in your lineup in most cases. When you look at guys like Kirk Cousins facing Tampa Bay, Baker facing Baltimore, Tua facing Kansas City, and Derek Carr facing Indianapolis, we also have Jared Goff facing this same New England defense. And so I like Cam Newton. I think you could do a lot worse in the streaming end than Cam Newton this week. I think his rushing ability will keep him there. But let's pivot over to Jared Goff facing this New England defense. And so, Austin, I'll ask you, Jared Goff, worth a stream? Are you going to double down after that Arizona performance?
I'm not feeling great about Jared Goff this week against New England. Jared Goff has had some good performances this season, but he's been way too inconsistent to keep in your lineup regardless of the matchup. And this week's against New England does not give me a ton of confidence in the man, given the Patriots defense has led up the 5th fewest points to the quarterbacking position. And we take a little look at Jared Goff's last month. It's a roller coaster. 26 points last week, 3 the week before that, 29, 10 points. And last week's was an interesting breakdown. While he had over 350 yards passing, 0 touchdowns through the air. He kind of saved your fantasy day there with his 3rd rushing touchdown of the year. But again, that was just his 3rd since week 5. He's not a reliable rusher. You can't bank on that. It's a cherry on top if you get it. And coming from a multiple touchdown perspective, Goff has 3 times the amount of games with 0 touchdowns compared to 3 touchdowns. He's hit 3 touchdowns once all season. He's gone 0 touchdowns 3 times this year. He's got some favorable matchups ahead if you've got him for the playoff run, going up against the Jets, then Seattle, then Arizona. But given they're going against the Patriots this week, who just goose-egged Justin Herbert, and the Los Angeles Chargers, a team that was averaging over 23 points per game, I'm not feeling great about Jared Goff this week.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that could get Jared Goff there, or the only thing you like about Jared Goff, is his ability to get it to his wide receivers. And we'll start with Robert Woods here. He's not seen fewer than 11 targets, 7 catches, or 80 yards in 3 straight games. He's number 15 in the NFL in targets with 97. For this Rams team, he's got 23% of the target market share, and his 13 red zone targets. That's 15th most in the NFL amongst wide receivers. So you like what Woods is doing. This, though, is going to be the 7th toughest matchup on paper. New England only giving up 21.2 points per game. They're only allowing on average 152 receiving yards to wide receivers. So you got to think that's split up 3, sometimes 4 ways, depending on how many of your wide receivers get involved. And so for me, like, you look at the 6th fewest wide receiver touchdowns given up by New England. This is going to be a tough matchup. You look at the draw for Woods, though. You're gonna keep Woods because he's going to avoid Gilmore, I think, more than often than not, because Gilmore's kind of stayed put on a lot of his routes, and they move Woods around. You look at Cooper Kupp, who I think actually has the best matchup this week. He's going to get Jonathan Jones in the slot, and Jonathan Jones giving up 1.6 yards per route run, and Cooper Kupp himself averaging 2.0 yards per route run. So really love that. And then Cooper's just been getting it done. 11 or more PPR points in 3 of his last 5. 70 or more receiving yards in 3 of his last 5, and he leads this team with red zone targets. 15. That's 11th in the NFL. Josh Reynolds was a cute story over the last few weeks. He's just not getting it done. He hasn't seen more than 40 yards receiving in 3 straight. So I really think it's Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods for me, and I would actually give the edge to Cooper Kupp in this game. I think that's the guy you're starting with more confidence. And just to touch on the tight ends, because I know Higbee and Everett had a good game last week. This is not a good matchup for them. Only 1 tight end touchdown New England's given up all year. I would not focus on trying to get any of these tight ends involved in your lineup. New England top 5 against the tight end. But Johnny, I think the biggest question for the Rams this week is Cam Akers here? Has he arrived, and can we start him with confidence?
Oh, we've been waiting for it. We've been waiting, and it looks like Cam Akers has arrived. But what is the confidence level? Like I said, it's Thursday night, the start of the fantasy playoffs. Are you able to roll out Cam Akers? I think you are, and I'll tell you why. New England Patriots, you look at the matchup, it's not a scary matchup. New England Patriots in the middle of the road, and fantasy points allowed to the opposing running back was 17.8. But if you look a little bit closer here, New England Patriots, specifically to the running back, New England giving up 97 yards per game on the ground. Well, what do we know about this running back backfield and what we've seen over the last few weeks? Well, Cam Akers has played on 62%. He played on 62% of the snaps this past week. His snaps have been increasing each and every single week over the last 3 weeks. You look at Darrell Henderson. He only played on 23% of snaps, 3rd lowest of the year, and he saw 6 total touches, which was the 2nd lowest on the year. And then you have Malcom Brown, who just seems to be in there, the spell. He was a season low as well, 15%. So it does seem to be between Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson that you would look at this. And I've been saying this all year. I believe that Sean McVay really wants this to be a thunder and lightning show, but we have to call it where it is. Do I trust Darrell Henderson in my lineup this week? I don't. I do trust Cam Akers in my lineup because he is going to be given the goal line work. If you look, 3 out of the last 4 weeks, he's led the team in red zone carries. And you look at New England Patriots giving up 9 rushing touchdowns this year. Cam Akers should get the goal line work. If there's a rushing touchdown to be had, it will be had by Akers. I trust him in this game to put in your lineup, at least as a flex.
Be mindful, by the time you guys are watching this one, you'll know if Cam Akers is going to miss the game, but he does have a shoulder ailment that he picked up in that Arizona game. So just keep an eye on that. There hasn't been any word that thinks that he'll miss, but you'll know by the time you're watching this one. We want to say thank you for watching this. We've wrapped up our Thursday night matchup. If you have any more questions or comments or concerns about this particular game or any others on the slate for Week 14, go ahead and comment below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe. For Austin Sear, for Johnny Game Time Hicks, I'm Big Travie, and we are the Fantasy Whisperers. We're out. Peace.
Good luck in your playoffs, man. Let's do it.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and click subscribe. And if you want to watch more fantasy football content, check out one of these videos.